Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have another Shop Talk video. Today's topic is going to be more relatable to the dealership mechanic, and it's going to be the topic regarding mechanics versus advisors and why there's always going to be some animosity there. Now before we go ahead and get started, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below. Definitely smash that like button because it helps channel out. With that said, let's go and get started on today's topic. So for most of you that aren't aware, the way that a dealership service department runs as far as the mechanical aspect of it is you have your mechanics that typically do the work, and then you'll have a service advisor that'll be the liaison between people dropping off their vehicles to be worked on. They pretty much are a sales team is the best way to put them. And then you have your management staff. So when you're working at a dealership, depending on the size of the dealership, you may have a group of mechanics batched to a certain advisor. Like in my scenario, when I worked at the dealer, typically you would find a group of 4 to 5 mechanics. You would have a lot of different skill set levels where you'd have, let's say, a loop tech, a intermediate tech, and then 3 journeymen or full-fledged mechanics. And they would be working for one of the advisors. We'd call these teams. And sometimes there would be 4 or 5 of these teams depending on the size of the dealership. And the way it always worked is that you always want to try to have the best relationship with your service advisor, because at the end of the day, they are the liaison. That's how you can communicate what the vehicle needs are to the customer. Unfortunately, they don't allow mechanics to have access to calling customers. Even though we have all the information, it's just not a standard practice of a mechanic calling a customer saying, hey, you need brakes, da 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 da. So the way they like to do it is they have a specialized person that is trained in sales and in dealing with customers, just to kind of free up mechanics from having to do anything. Because, you know, in a dealership, the way the work always flows is vehicle comes in, I check it out. Typically, I would have to write down what the car needs, go to the parts department, get an estimate of said parts, hand it into the advisor, and then they would, you know, look at the parts cost and prices, and then they would determine labor rates and everything and put it all in there. Now, sometimes it works just the opposite, where you just write down your recommendations. The advisor takes care of everything else, is their job, and they'll figure out the labor times and everything as far as parts cost. Sometimes you're also figuring out labor cost, what parts cost are, and then just giving them that info when the advisor puts it together. But regardless which scenario it is, it's always the same thing. The advisor is there to, one, be your voice to the customer, to also be the customer's voice to you, the technician. And after those two criteria are met, they are there to be a sales rep to recommend the services that their vehicle needs and what you're suggesting for the vehicle as far as repairs. Now, it all sounds nice and peachy. You might say, hey, Mike, that's a great system. You know, mechanics get to do what they do best, and then they have a dedicated person that, you know, can relay the messages to customers. And that's not always true, because as much as I've had a great relationship with most of my advisors when I used to work at the dealership, there was also a few experiences that were love and hate, to say the least. Now, I can only honestly say I worked at one dealership where I just hated the advisor. We never got along, and it wasn't just me. It was pretty much my whole team, and everyone at the dealership just didn't get along with this person. And I was unfortunate enough to get stuck with them being my advisor, and me and the group of mechanics that worked under them. I mean, let's just say it was a rough time. It was always a crap show where, you know, you give them the information and they would somehow, let's say you gave them a brake job, parts of, let's say cost was 200 bucks, labor was 100 bucks, it should be $300. You'd come back and be like, oh, I got the job sold for 235. Like, wait a minute, where is the mix up? It's supposed to be an hour labor. Why am I only getting paid for, let's say, 20 minutes of labor? Oh, well, I had to make a sale, so I worked with the numbers. And now that's the key thing. Most advisors, when it comes down to making a sale, what they're gonna try to do is they're always gonna try to lower the labor rate for the customer, or try to get the mechanic to give in, because most parts departments are not gonna drop parts prices. The parts price is pretty much set in stone. And it should be the same way for labor rates, but it's not uncommon when you work as a team. Like, for example, if let's say I'm doing a brake job on the front and rear of a vehicle, and that's paying me 2 hours of labor, and plus parts. And I also recommended a brake flush. Then if I recommended an hour for that brake flush, the advisor might be like, hey, as a selling tactic, I'm going to reduce this to half an hour of labor. So you'll still get paid, but you're doing a major service along with a small service. So everyone's equally happy. The customer gets a little bit of a discount, and the mechanic still is able to gain that half hour. Now, depending on what type of tech you are, you may see that as a good thing because your advisor is trying to upsell and try to take care of both people at the same time. Or you might just take it as an approach of, my advisor is a pain in the butt and I hate them because they're shorting me on my hours and my money. So there's also two different types of techs depending on how your mentality. Now, if I'm doing front and rear brake jobs, pads and rotors, and I recommend a brake flush, and if it goes from paying me 1 hour of labor to, let's say, half an hour or 7/10 on the labor scale, I would be okay with that because at least they're keeping me busy. They're selling something. I'd rather take the 7/10 than take 0/10 of not getting that service done. So for me, it was always an upside. Plus, I understand that sometimes you got to wheel and deal to be able to make a sale happen through. Sometimes you can get greedy and have let's say not discount 3/10 of an hour, and you might lose 2 and 7/10 hours on the job, and that's something you got to work with. Now, again, if it's a situation like that, me and the advisors were always cool. I didn't have an issue. But sometimes you get an advisor where they would just obliterate it and say, oh yeah, we're going to do the pads and rotors and I'll give you a free brake flush. Like, no, I need to get paid. I don't do stuff for free. And that's what happened in this dealership with the advisor that we couldn't get along with. They were always just switching off certain labor times and just giving away stuff for free, and it never really hurt them. It always hurt us because the way a service advisor gets paid, it's based on the average of total sales on commission. It's not per job. And mechanics, unfortunately, we're paid per job, per hour booked if you're book time. So they were always screwing around with our hours, and that's always the biggest thing. What can cause a mechanic and a service advisor to go toe to toe. If you mess with a mechanic's hours and you don't have a good reason for doing so and you're shorting them, creates havoc. Now, when I worked at the dealership where I had a good relationship with my advisors, they would always explain like, hey, I had to knock down 3/10 of an hour to sell the job. That's fine. Like I mentioned, if I lose 3/10 of an hour on a 4-hour job, I don't care. I'm still getting paid 3 and 7/10 hours, which is still money in my pocket. So as long as they had a legitimate excuse and reasoning for it, it was fine. But in every service department, there's always going to be animosity. I always found that whether you love or hate your service advisor, there's always going to be some issue in between the two. And I'm actually going to be making another Shop Talk video describing a situation where the advisor was just only caring about their bottom line, not giving a crap about the mechanics. They were just trying to pad their own wallet with money, and it wound up being bad for them. So, overall, because I'm going to be making that video, I decided to explain in this video how a relationship between an advisor and a technician works, and how sometimes there can be grief here or there. And if you're a mechanic watching this and you're going through stuff like this and you're hard-headed about it, you got to remember that sometimes it's better to get 50% of something than nothing. So as long as it's legitimate and there's a good reason for it, I say just go with the flow, because in the long run, if you develop a good relationship with your advisor, you're going to be inclined to get a little bit more work, because sometimes I might lose a half hour on a job from my advisor, and then on the back end, they would wind up getting, let's say, some warranty work that had a really high pay rate and be like, hey, Mike, I shorted you a half hour on this job. Here's a 3-hour job that I know you're going to get done in an hour. I'm like, wow, thanks. I lost a half hour, but I gained 2 hours, So again, it's a relationship that you want to keep nice and tidy, I guess you can say. Make sure you respect one another, and there's going to be the situations where you do have an argument or two. It's kind of like a friendship or like a marriage. You got to always be on good terms, even though there's going to be ups and downs. Try to play nice with each other and be good and courteous to each other, because you're always going to see that you may lose a little bit here, but you have more to gain as long as your advisor is on par and is caring about their mechanics and what they're doing, not just giving a crap about themselves and being selfish. So just wanted to throw that out there and make this quick video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please comment, like, and subscribe, because it definitely helps the channel grow. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.